Imagine being tasked with defeating the demons that roam your land, all whilst upholding your duties as the commander of your squadron and princess of the kingdom. But having been captured, you brace yourself to be tortured, but it seems the demons have quite a few peculiar tactics to squeeze intel out of you. Our anime opens in the desert, where our MC Princess Hime, the leader of the Knight's 3rd Army Squadron, is seen taking a break from their travel. One of her knights reports that it'll take another day for travel until they reach the monster they need to hunt, but out of nowhere the creature they've been searching for appears before them. As the horned giant clobbers the surrounding knights, Hime springs into action. Relieved the creature has come to them, with the giant's club destroying and terrorizing the knights. They all seem to despair the creature before them, but Hime draws her blade, heroically firing off some aerial slashes the land directly on the creature. Within mere moments, Hime single-handedly dispatched the creature before them, something that makes her men cheer out of joy, prompting Hime to join in as she raises her holy blade, Excalibur. As several years pass by, we cut to a scary-looking castle where we discover that Hime has been locked up alongside her sword, seemingly losing all hope. Hime's sentient blade, X, recounts that the Imperial Army had gone to war with the Hell Horde, and with some unfortunate events unfolding, Hime was ultimately captured, but she seems to be resilient even in her current situation. At that moment, several demons begin marching towards Hime's cell, and with a single glance, Hime flinches, fearing what may happen to her. Entering the cell, Tortura, the Hell Horde's Grand Inquisitor, once again asks Hime to spill any secrets the Royal Empire may be keeping. But X speaks up, reminding Torture that Hime would never betray her kingdom. Having no other choice, Torture says she'll have to torture Hime to make her break, prompting Dharma to show off a horrifying-looking metal casket. X cries that human laws prevent prisoners from being tortured, but Torture says demon laws are different, something Hime had anticipated as she declares she'll stay strong till the very end. Intrigued, Torture starts by opening up the iron casket, only to show off a delectable-looking piece of toast. Seeing Dharma setting up a table to plate the toast, X cries that such a tactic would never fool a princess, but Hime seems completely hypnotized by the toast. Although Hime snaps out of her daze, she is seen holding herself back, but Torture chooses to fan the sweet scent of the toast to further entice Hime. Instantly, Hime pictures herself in a field, all while she waits for some buttery toast to bake. Luckily, X once again snaps Hime out of her daze, but when Torture splits the toast in half, the sheer crispy texture of the bread ensnares Hime. Hime begins picturing a world where she has unlimited bread to devour, even temporarily ascending her human form, but is brought to reality as she cries that a commander like herself will never succumb to such bold torture. Following up, Torture unveils a bowl with leftover beef stew, tearing off a piece of the toast only to use it to clean off the remainder of the stew. Seeing the stew and toast combination, Hime helplessly watches as Torture devours the meal before her, ultimately making Hime shiver and quake as she finally agrees to talk. Hime is seen giving out information on the Imperial Army's weak point, only to desperately ask for some toast, but Torture glares at her, reminding Hime that she should know her place. Surprisingly, Torture unveils a whole set of baked goods, throwing a mini toast party for Hime, all whilst X gets confused at what they're witnessing. Later that night, we see Torture reporting her findings to a mysterious figure, agreeing to keep Hime captured and squeeze more information out of her. Torture apologizes to Hime as she'll need to be tortured every day moving forward, only to cut to the next day where Torture prepares her torture, but X declares that Hime won't be so easy to break this time as she isn't hungry unlike yesterday. Upon unveiling a takoyaki stand, Hime is seen admiring the variation of toppings presented, but X reminds Hime to keep her cool. Hime admits that such lowly foods shouldn't tempt her, but Hime remembers the times when her kingdom would hold festivals and she would have to watch her citizens dine on takoyaki while she watched from afar, something that makes Hime cry. Feeling sympathetic, Torture offers Hime a takoyaki ball to taste, something Hime immediately scoffs down only to shriek as it burns her mouth. Hime is dazzled by the gooey exterior and plump interior of the ball, a moment Heim wants to experience again as she ultimately confesses to whatever torture asks of her. Having told the demons where the Imperial Army hid their ultimate weapon, Heim shows off her own takoyaki creation, something that doesn't amuse X. That night, Torture is seen making her report to Kanaj, an attendant of the Hell Lord, surprised to hear that the Hell Lord Mao refuses to toy with the ultimate weapon the Imperial Army hid away. Seeing as the information she obtained is useless, we cut to midnight the next day, where Heim accuses Torture of trying to deprive her of sleep, but Heim declares she has stayed up many nights fighting until dawn. Switching things up, Torture once again unveils a shiny new food item that blinds Heim, an item Heim recognizes as ramen. Cursing at her own stomach for craving such a glistening meal, X tries warning Heim against such a thing, but Heim is fixated at the creamy broth, apologizing to X as she can't help it. To make things worse, Torture begins to sip on the thick broth, something that makes Heim beg for her own portion, and when Torture begins slurping down the noodles, Heim begins to scream and writhe in pain. On the brink of death, Heim says she can still hold out, but upon seeing Torture preparing some rice, chili paste, garlic, and nori wrap to complement the ramen, Heim begins to stutter over her own words, finally giving in. Given her own bowl of ramen, Heim nonchalantly savors the late-night snack, cutting over to Torture, who reports her findings. Out of nowhere, two other demons offer to torture Heim tomorrow, all whilst Heim sleeps, soundly dreaming of all the foods she has eaten whilst locked up. The next day, we see Torture introduce Lutorment Yuki and Inky. People Torture warns Heim not to underestimate. Getting to work, Yuki and Inky get tucked into some super jump brawlers, a video game that intrigues Heim, but X cries that such a tactic is useless against the princess. Heim sadly begins to crack, remembering that she had a strict childhood filled with training and the only friend she had was X. Inky asks if Heim would like to play with them, but Heim hesitates since she doesn't know how to play. But when Torture offers to join as well, Heim gladly sits down to play as 4 players. Entranced by the fun, we see our girls immersed in the game, where Yuki's character faces off against Heim, whilst Inky takes on Torture. Seeing as Heim had dominated Yuki, Torture and Inky team up against Heim. But even with her back against the wall, Heim decimates the others, sweeping up the lobby. As the demon girls shower Heim with praise, Heim ultimately reveals that security in the Western Gate is weak on Wednesday, but before Yuki and Inky leave, they reassure Heim they'll be back to play more. With Heim excited to make new friends, we cut over to Mao, who learns of the Imperial Army's weakness on Wednesday, believing it to be due to cram school, but following Torture, we see her enjoying a bubble bath whilst planning her next torture. Torture wonders where her fellow demon that was sent west is, cutting over to the next day, where Beastmaster Kral has appeared to enact her torture. X states that Heim once slaughtered a horde of frenzied beasts, but Kral uses a surprise attack, calling for an adorable polar cub to appear. Heim immediately yearns to play with it, all whilst it flounders around playing with a ball. Seeing Heim refuse to give in, Kral chooses to take the ball away from the cub, declaring that Heim can rectify things if she confesses, something that pisses Heim off. Before Heim can scold Kral for doing something so horrible, she notices Kral squirming, realizing that Kral feels terrible for stealing the cub's ball away. Within a few minutes, Kral ends up giving the ball back, immediately apologizing to the cub as she cuddles and promises to not hurt it again. Surprisingly, Heim is touched by such honesty from Kral, ultimately spilling more secrets as she finally gets to adore the furry cub. As both girls cuddle with the cub, we hear that Kral's mission up west prior was demolition work, and it seems Kral isn't a bad person after all. In the coming day, Torture says they'll need to relocate for their next torture, asking Heim to put on some earmuffs and a blindfold only to be escorted into a hot spring. At first, Heim is weirded out, but she suddenly sees a massive creature approaching her, only for the lady to introduce herself as Giant, a combat soldier. Heim is amazed at Giant's massive stature, but X demands to know what type of torture Giant has in store, declaring that Heim would never succumb to anything since Heim is used to enduring all sorts of harsh conditions during her battles. Sadly, Heim begins to melt into the hot, steamy hot spring, but she reassures X that she can still keep her cool as she was never spoiled as a child. Shocked, Jikan offers to pamper and hug Hime, immediately pulling her in and embracing her, something that confuses Hime. Taking in the moment, Hime begins picturing a carefree childhood, growing up with Giant as her mother, convincing her to spill the beans, only to decompress in a massage chair alongside the others. Torture is seen receiving another order to gather more intel, suddenly getting an idea as she turns to face a vending machine that sells snacks, all returning home only to offer up some chocolate-filled cookies to the princess for her collaboration. X says Hime was given various luxurious desserts growing up, plus Hime was always guarded by Jamochi, her honored knight, so such a thing wouldn't faze Hime. But Hime reveals that Jamochi secretly bought her similar snacks as a present for her hard work. Hime says the gorilla cookies were an expensive snack, and with the same amount of money, she could buy multiple other cheaper snacks, so Torture's tactics won't work on her. Slowly, Torture unboxes the snacks and begins nomming on them one at a time, something that confuses Hime, but Hime suddenly realizes Torture isn't appreciating the cute images on the cookie. Hime demands Torture show some love to the images on the cookies, but upon seeing Torture continue to emotionlessly devour the cookies, Hime begins to despair, refusing to allow Torture to mock the sanctity of the gorilla cookies. Giving Torture what she needs, Torture learns that the queen's shoe size is 23 centimeters, all whilst Hime devours the cookies. But outside the demon castle, we see a mysterious knight appear, declaring they'll rescue the princess. Back in the castle, Yuki and Inky ask Hime if she wants to go with them to a theme park tomorrow. But when Torture hears of the offer, she immediately forbids Hime from leaving her cell. Torture realizes she can turn this opportunity into a torture, declaring that if Hime confesses another secret, she'll be allowed to go. But Hime chooses to remain silent. With an hour passing, Torture turns up the heat by revealing that the theme park will open soon, and if Hime confesses, Torture will give her some proper clothes and teleport her there. X warns Hime that the theme park may all be a lie, reminding Hime of the time one of her most trusted friends had tried to betray her, ultimately forcing Hime to put down her own ally. Torture is impressed Hime didn't crack this time, but when Hime receives photos of Yuki and Inky waiting outside of the theme park for her, Hime pulls a 180 and begs to go. Giving a quick confession, Hime is teleported to the theme park in a cute outfit, only to begin enjoying her time with her new friends, completely indulging in the various rides and food, only to end the day off with a fireworks show. That night, Torture reports that the king prefers the sea over land, only for Torture to hear that Mao's own daughter will be joining in on the torture session tomorrow. Outside the castle, we see the mysterious knight begin to chant something. But as we cut to the next day, we see Torture enter Hime's cell only to immediately kneel down, stepping into the cell as well as Mao Chan, the Demon King's only daughter, someone Hime can't help but adore. X reminds Hime that the daughter of the most despicable being to exist is in front of her, but Mao corrects X, declaring that she feels so much pressure as she wants to make her dad proud. Seeing Mao tear up, Hime cheers Mao on, only for Mao to start her torture. Mao first takes out some bubble wrap, beginning to pop them as she asks if Hime is jealous, but Hime knows such a tactic would never work. Before Mao can continue the torture, she realizes she popped all her bubble wrap, beginning to cry once more, something that forces Hime to talk as she doesn't want to see Mao sad. Torture is amazed Mao got the Imperial Army's secret code from Hime, and seeing as Mao is now free to play with Hime nonchalantly breaks free from her binds only to begin playing tag with Mao. Following Mao, he can't help but feel proud of Mao for completing her first torture, choosing to frame the secret code instead of relaying it to his minions. Back with the mysterious knight, we see that their spell is forming a veil over the demon castle. But before we see the result, we cut back to Torture, who has prepared some soup dumplings for Hime. X knows that Chinese food is Hime's weakness, but surprisingly Hime could care less, reminiscing on the times when Jamochi would treat Hime to some Chinese food after her lessons. Hime said she always hated the soup dumplings as it burns her mouth, but Torture scolds Hime for not eating the soup dumplings correctly. Torture reveals that Hime must puncture the dumpling's skin and slurp up the piping hot broth first, surprising Hime. To top things off, Torture shows off the aromatic savory dumpling that Hime can have if she confesses, something that makes Hime blab about the Imperial Army guards switching shifts every Sunday, resulting in a weaker security during that time. As Hime scoops up a mouth full of dumplings, Kanaj is seen telling Mao about the kingdom's weakness on Sunday, but Mao says he can't capitalize since he's busy on Sundays. Having finished their incantation, we see the mysterious knight sneaking into Hime's cell, having put all the guards in the demon castle to sleep, only to introduce themselves as Louch Britain, White Knight of the Imperial First Legion. Apparently, Hime had always put up a strong front when it came to discussing men she was interested in, but in secret she dreamt of the day her Prince Charming would come and rescue her. In the present, Hime gleefully wonders if her dreams are finally coming true, slowly watching as Louch unmasks himself, but upon seeing an older-looking man, Hime snaps back to reality. Hime reveals she can free herself from her binds, asking Louch what his plan to escape is, only to hear that Louch's sleep spell will run out soon, so they should use a return spell to head home. Louch warns Hime that they'll need to be quite close for the spell to work, cutting to a few seconds later where they're holding each other tight, only for Louch to begin chanting his spell. Hime slowly begins getting flustered, seeing as Louch is very close to her. But as Louch begins to focus harder and harder on the spell, his grasp on Hime's waist grows tighter. Refusing to be taken advantage of, Hime breaks free and cuts down Louch, all whilst Louch's spell teleports himself away. The next day, things return to normal, but Mao wonders why Torture hasn't given him any more valuable information, requesting to speak with her personally. As Torture kneels before the Demon King, she hears Mao mocking the information she gave him, and to make things worse, Mao asks Torture to show him the torture methods she's been using. Seeing as her life is on the line, Torture gets serious, returning with her iron casket, but Kanaj declares that the Demon King's mental resilience stands above all beings. Torture chooses to slowly unveil her torture, something that intrigues everyone as she shows off a chill beer. Mao reminds Torture that he enjoys beverages with his wife every day. Plus, he has tasted all types of fine beverages in his lifetime. Therefore, a measly can beer won't do anything. Smirking, Torture cracks open a cold one, something that piques Mao's interest as he watches Torture elegantly pour the beer from a height into a glass. Mao knows that pouring from so high up will create foam, but Torture had planned such a thing, waiting for the foam to subside only to fill the remainder of the glass. Mao can't help but gulp at the delectable beverage, an item that tempts Mao with its fluffy top and golden elixir base. Out of nowhere, Mao's distress begins to shake the room he's in, something that shocks Kanaj as the hero for the Imperial Army didn't faze Mao one bit. But seeing the crispy drink before him, Mao comedically confesses that his weakness is light magic. Finally given the beverage, Mao gulps down the sweet nectar with one mouthful, suddenly engulfed in happiness as he temporarily dissipates from his throne. Succeeding in keeping her job, Torture celebrates with a pint of her own, only to visit Hime the next day, where she tells Hime their torture will be a little different. X immediately declares Hime will confess, surprising Hime as X has given up on Hime. But surprisingly, Torture calls for Gilga, the weaponsmith, to appear. Gilga immediately gets to work inspecting X's build, feeling bad since a sacred blade had been left in the ground for ages. So Torture says X will be the one to be tortured today. X cries that a prestigious blade like itself has only ever serviced the royal family and nobles, so will never crack under any torture. But when Gilga begins derusting X's exterior, X begins to celebrate. Snapping out of its daze, X says it was only letting out a battle cry. But when Gilga begins grinding down X's edges for a sharper finish, X declares it can feel itself returning to its former glory. Not even a few minutes later, Gilga suddenly stops her service, unmasking herself only to offer to finish off the cleaning and polishing service if X confesses, exciting X as they willingly share some secrets. Within a few minutes, X proudly shows off their glittery and polished form, all whilst Torture voices her amazement upon hearing the Demon Sword Marasa and Fire Sword Amon are lovers. That night, as Heim sleeps, X wakes her up to apologize for breaking so easily, both agreeing to do better in the future. The next day, Kral returns to torture Heim, but Heim is more curious to see how the polar cub is doing. Kral takes the chance to invite Heim to visit her home and meet the other animals she has. But torture reminds Kral to get serious, prompting Kral to call for a terrifying mad wolf to enter the cell. X immediately warns Heim to stay on high alert. But although Heim says she has slain wolves in the past, she has never faced a mad wolf before. With Kral starting the torture, she strangely calls for the mad wolf to attack with its paw, but strangely Kral ends up snuggling with its massive paw. Kral adds that a mad wolf's paw smells divine, but Heim couldn't care less, even offering to smell the wolf's paw, but to Heim there is nothing unique about it. Kral begins to grow annoyed, even telling Heim about how torture keeps a picture of her niece on her phone, in order to convince Heim to give the paw another sniff. Hesitant at first, Heim gives in, suddenly realizing that the paw indeed does give off a popcorn scent, plus the wolf's furry paw makes a great snuggle tool. With Kral glad to have another sister appreciate the paw hype, Kral asks if the girls would like to visit her home, and seeing as there are bunnies, torture gladly allows it. With the girls spending their day with the various animals Kral has tamed, we cut to several days later where Mau Mau is back, asking for Heim to capture her enjoying her time in the park as a form of torture. With Heim following and watching Mau Mau have a blast, X fears that Heim will give in and join Mau Mau. But Heim says she never liked playing in the park as royalty, is forbidden from playing in the park with other kids. Seeing Heim standing triumphantly, X praises Heim for remaining resolute. But the more Heim thinks about her past, the more she yearns to live out what she couldn't as a child. As Mau Mau runs and hugs Heim, she begs Heim to play with her, something that Heim can't refuse as she confesses some intel only to begin exploring the park with Mau Mau. When the other demon girls arrive, the gang play kickball, red light, green light, and build various sandcastles. As the sun begins to set, they choose to go on an evening walk, all happy to hear that Mau Mau enjoyed her time together, all agreeing to play more in the future. That night, Kanaj hears that Mau Mau was able to get the Royal Empire's security password, but Mau admits he doesn't know what the password is as he was too busy watching the recordings of his daughter enjoy her time in the park.